All right, let's dive in, everyone. Today we're taking a close look at, well, some pretty interesting Bitcoin activity.
Yeah, pretty interesting indeed, from just yesterday, actually.
Oh, wow, so this is hot off the presses.
February 16th, 2025.
So hot.
And it's a bit of a head-scratcher because, on the one hand, we have a massive inflow of Bitcoin onto exchanges.
Okay.
We're talking $1.04 billion worth.
Wow.
But at the same time, we also saw this huge chunk of Bitcoin move from a wallet that's been completely dormant for years.
So it's like a tale of two whales.
Yeah.
One's diving in and one's, I don't know, coming up for air.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating to try and unpack.
Okay, so let's start with this influx.
Okay.
$1 billion, that's a lot of Bitcoin, even in the crypto world.
Oh, absolutely.
Does this mean we're about to see a mass exodus? Everyone's going to cash out?
Well, it's not necessarily that simple, but typically when you see an inflow like this, it does signal selling pressure. You know, think about it this way. Like, anytime you have a sudden surge of something hitting the market,
Right.
whether it's Bitcoin or bananas, the price tends to dip a little.
Yes, simple supply and demand.
Yeah, exactly.
But this influx comes after we've actually had 3 weeks of Bitcoin flowing out of the exchanges.
Right.
It's almost like the market can't make up its mind.
Yeah, and it's that push and pull that we really want to dig into today because that's what makes this so interesting. And then you've also got that $94,000 support level.
Oh, right.
That's a key price point that we want to keep an eye on because if Bitcoin breaks below that, it could trigger a cascade of selling as people start to get nervous.
All right, so we've got this potential for a dip, but then you also mentioned this mysterious transfer from a long dormant wallet.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
This one is really interesting. On February 10th, so just a few days ago, a wallet that hadn't moved in at least 7, maybe even 10 years.
Whoa, 10 years. That's like prehistoric in crypto time.
Right. I mean, seriously, what is this whale thinking after all this time?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And here's what makes it even more interesting. That those Bitcoins weren't sent to an exchange.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem like they're planning on immediately selling.
So they're not cashing out? Are they just moving their digital hoard to a new hiding place?
It's possible.
Okay.
But, think about it this way. This Bitcoin was probably purchased when the price was under $20,000.
Wow.
We're talking about a potential profit here of over 470%.
Goodness.
So they might be moving it, sure, but they're also in a position to make a pretty serious impact if they do decide to sell.
Okay, now that's interesting. So we've got this potential sell-off pressure from this inflow. But then this other whale is kind of, I don't know, lurking out there maybe, playing a longer game.
Yeah.
It seems like there's these two opposing forces at work in the Bitcoin market.
You got it. And to make things even more interesting, Bitcoin is already down 12% from its recent high. All right, so all this activity just adds to the uncertainty.
Right.
Now, to really understand where things might go from here, we need to look at those both the bullish and the bearish signals that are kind of battling it out.
All right, so what are the bulls saying? What's keeping them optimistic with all this going on?
Well, institutional investors are still betting big on Bitcoin.
Okay.
MicroStrategy, for example.
Oh, yeah, they're big into Bitcoin.
They just bought another 7,633 Bitcoin, bringing their total holdings to, get this, 478,740 Bitcoin.
Whoa, that's a lot of Bitcoin.
It's a lot of faith in Bitcoin.
Are they just blindly following the hype, or is there a strategy there?
Oh, no, they definitely have a strategy.
Okay.
The CEO has been very vocal about his belief in Bitcoin as a long-term store of value.
Right.
He calls it, digital gold, essentially.
I've heard that.
And this latest purchase, especially at a time when the market is kind of shaky, sends a strong signal to other investors. Okay, so MicroStrategy is leading the charge. But are there other signs of, institutional interest out there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're also seeing continued inflows into Bitcoin ETFs,
Right.
which are basically baskets of Bitcoin that investors can buy and sell on traditional stock exchanges.
Yeah, makes it a bit easier to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So this suggests that institutional money is still flowing into Bitcoin.
Even with all the volatility.
Even with all the volatility, yeah.
So it's not just the Maverick CEOs out there, but the the big institutions are dipping their toes in.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a point for the bulls.
Right.
But what about the other side? What are the bears worried about?
Well, there are a couple things. Inflation and the potential for further interest rate hikes are major concerns right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's been on everyone's mind.
Yeah, I think so. And, these macroeconomic factors tend to make investors more risk-averse.
Right.
And Bitcoin, with its, price swings, it's often seen as a riskier asset.
Okay, so the big picture, the economic stuff could put a damper on things, but is there anything happening within the Bitcoin market that's giving bears pause?
There is, actually.
Okay.
It has to do with what's called on-chain data.
On-chain data.
Yeah, basically it's data that's recorded directly on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay.
And it can give us some insights into how different groups of investors are behaving.
So it's like spying on the Bitcoin network.
In a way, yeah. It's giving us a peek behind the curtain.
What's it telling us?
Well, it's showing us that large holders, those whales we were talking about earlier, are moving significant amounts of Bitcoin to exchanges.
Oh.
And historically, that is something that often precedes a sell-off.
Oh, that's not good. So these whales who, are presumably more experienced understand the market better.
Yeah, they've been around the block.
Could be getting ready to jump ship.
Yeah, it's a possibility, and I see why the bears are a little worried.
Yeah.
But here's where things get really fascinating. This whale activity could actually be connected to that massive transfer that we talked about earlier. What if that 14,000 Bitcoin move was just the tip of the iceberg?
Wait, hold on. You're saying other whales might be seeing this as a sign and starting to reposition themselves?
Exactly, and that brings us to the heart of this deep dive today, which is trying to understand the motivations and strategies of these long-term Bitcoin holders.
Right.
They're the ones who really influence the market's direction.
Yeah.
And their actions can send, ripples throughout the entire crypto ecosystem.
This is where it gets really interesting, trying to decipher the movements of these Bitcoin giants, these whales.
It's like we're trying to predict the weather based on the behavior of a few particularly influential clouds.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's not about predicting their every move, but about understanding those broader patterns and trends.
Okay.
And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to look at how coin aging, which is essentially the movement of older Bitcoin, can give us some clues about what these whales might be planning.
All right. I'm hooked. Let's dive even deeper and see what secrets we can uncover about these Bitcoin behemoths. So you mentioned coin aging.
Right.
As a way to kind of get into the minds of these Bitcoin whales.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
So coin aging is essentially tracking how long Bitcoin has been sitting in a particular wallet.
Okay.
It helps us distinguish between, those who are in it for the quick flip
Right.
and those who are playing the long game.
Okay.
The folks who've been holding on to their Bitcoin for years and years.
The OGs.
Yeah, exactly. Through all the ups and downs.
Weathering the storms.
Exactly.
So by looking at how these older coins are moving, we can kind of get a sense of whether those long-term holders are, starting to get restless, maybe looking to take profits or accumulate even more.
Exactly. Yeah, you can think of it like observing the migration patterns of a herd. Are they staying put, suggesting contentment, or are they starting to shift and potentially signaling a change in strategy?
I like that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So are we seeing any significant movement with these older coins right now?
Yeah.
Is the herd getting restless?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And the answer is it's a bit nuanced.
Okay.
We're not seeing a mass exodus of old coins, which is actually a somewhat bullish sign.
Okay.
It suggests that those who held onto it for the long haul, they're not panicking.
Yeah.
They've seen these dips before.
They've been through it.
Exactly.
Okay, so the old guard is holding steady. Yeah. At least for now.
Yeah.
But how does that tie back to this idea of the tug of war
Right.
between the bullish and the bearish forces in the market?
Well, remember that massive transfer of 14,000 Bitcoin that we talked about earlier? If that whale decides to sell even a portion of their holdings, it could create significant downward pressure on the price, especially given that current influx that we're seeing into exchanges.
Right, especially with all that going on.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that also create a buying opportunity for other long-term holders?
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, they could swoop in and scoop up Bitcoin at a discount, almost like, whales feeding on a sudden abundance of krill.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this whole situation so fascinating. It's this delicate balance, right? You've got these opposing forces, each trying to anticipate the other's moves.
It's a high-stakes game of chess.
It is.
With billions of dollars on the line.
Yeah.
So what are some other clues that we can look for to understand which side might have the upper hand in this crypto chess match?
Well, besides coin aging, I think it's important to look at the kind of the overall sentiment in the market.
Okay.
Are developers still building on the Bitcoin network?
Right.
Are companies still accepting Bitcoin as payment?
Mm-hmm.
Is there genuine excitement and innovation happening, or is it just hype and speculation?
So we need to look beyond just the price charts.
Yeah.
And look at the broader ecosystem.
Exactly.
Is Bitcoin still evolving and growing, or is it just kind of stagnating?
And that's where things get really interesting, because despite the recent volatility, the Bitcoin ecosystem is still showing signs of life.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we're seeing new technologies being developed, for example, the Lightning Network,
Right.
which aims to make, Bitcoin transactions faster and cheaper.
Hmm.
We're seeing countries like El Salvador embrace Bitcoin as legal tender.
Yeah, it's becoming more mainstream.
Exactly. So these are all signs that Bitcoin is more than just a speculative asset. It's a
Okay.
technology with real potential to disrupt traditional finance.
So while the short-term price action might be dominated by whales and speculators,
Yeah.
the long-term story of Bitcoin is being written by the innovators, the builders, and the believers.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why even amidst this uncertainty, it's important to remember those fundamentals.
Right.
What problem is Bitcoin trying to solve?
Mhm.
What are its strengths and weaknesses? How does it fit into this larger landscape of finance and technology?
Don't let the noise of the market drown out, your own research and understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, whether Bitcoin booms or busts in the short term,
Right.
the knowledge that you gain is going to be an invaluable asset.
And that knowledge, that deeper understanding, is exactly what we're after here on the Deep Dive.
Absolutely.
So as we continue to explore the world of Bitcoin, what are some key takeaways that you think our listeners should keep in mind?
I'd say the most important takeaway is that the Bitcoin market is this complex ecosystem with a diverse cast of characters.
Yeah.
From the whales making waves to the everyday investors just trying to ride those waves.
Right, everyone's in there.
Yeah, exactly. And while it's tempting to get caught up in the hype and the fear, the key to navigating this space is to focus on the fundamentals, the underlying technology, and the long-term potential of Bitcoin.
Right. So see beyond the headlines.
Yeah.
And understand the forces that are shaping this fascinating and often unpredictable market.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's be honest, those headlines can be pretty attention-grabbing.
They are.
Especially when we're talking about, whales potentially moving markets.
Right.
Speaking of which, didn't you mention something about transparency and regulation being key factors in all this?
I did.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
That's something that deserves, its own conversation, and we can definitely delve into that a little bit deeper.
Okay, perfect. Let's get into it.
All right.
Okay, so we've talked about whales, we've talked about market sentiment, we've even talked about Bitcoin's potential to disrupt traditional finance.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned transparency and regulation.
Right.
What role do they play in all this?
Well, I think transparency and regulation become especially important when you have these massive players, these whales,
Right.
who can, potentially move markets with their actions.
Yeah, it's a lot of power.
It is. It's like having this giant squid lurking in the depths. You want to be able to track its movements, understand its behavior,
Right.
so you can avoid any nasty surprises.
So more transparency means we can kind of keep a closer eye on the whales and maybe anticipate those big splashes they make.
Yeah, potentially.
But how do we get more transparency in a decentralized system like Bitcoin?
Right, well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Sure.
Bitcoin is designed to be pseudonymous, meaning that, transactions are recorded on the blockchain, but they're not directly linked to real-world identities.
Okay.
But, there are tools and techniques that allow us to analyze that on-chain data
Right.
and get a better understanding of how these different groups of investors are behaving, including those whales.
So we can follow the trail of Bitcoin even if we don't know exactly who's holding it.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about regulation?
Right.
Doesn't that go against the whole idea of Bitcoin being decentralized and free from from government control?
Well, there's definitely a delicate balance to strike there. Regulation is necessary, I think, to prevent illicit activities.
Right.
Money laundering, market manipulation, things like that.
It keeps fair.
Exactly. But it shouldn't stifle innovation or undermine those core principles of Bitcoin.
Right.
So the goal is to create a regulatory framework that protects investors, fosters a healthy market without, stifling the growth of this transformative technology.
It sounds like finding that balance is going to be tricky.
It is. It's a challenge.
What's the current state of regulation in the Bitcoin world? Is anyone even trying to wrangle this digital beast?
Well, governments and regulatory bodies around the world are definitely starting to pay attention.
Okay.
We're seeing different approaches emerge. Some countries are taking a more hands-off approach, while others are implementing stricter rules.
Okay.
So it's a rapidly evolving landscape.
It's like the Wild West of finance out there.
It is.
With everyone just trying to figure out the rules as they go.
Yeah.
But for us everyday investors just trying to navigate this uncertain terrain, what can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, I think diversification is key.
Okay.
Don't put all your eggs in the Bitcoin basket, so to speak.
Right.
Explore other cryptocurrencies. Consider investing in traditional assets like stocks and bonds. And always do your own research before making any decisions.
So, spread the risk, don't get caught up in the hype, and always remember, knowledge is power.
Absolutely, and that's what we aim to provide here on the Deep Dive.
That's right.
The knowledge and insights that you need to navigate this complex and ever-changing world of Bitcoin.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from massive Bitcoin transfers to the role of regulation. We've really taken a deep dive into the heart of the Bitcoin market.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating exploration.
It has.
And I hope our listeners have gained a deeper understanding of this revolutionary technology and the forces that are shaping its evolution.
And remember, folks, this is just a snapshot in time.
It is.
The Bitcoin story is far from over, and we'll be here to guide you through all the twists and turns as it unfolds.
Absolutely.
So stay curious, keep learning, and join us next time for another deep dive where we'll explore another fascinating corner of the world of finance and technology.
Sounds good.
Until then, happy investing, everyone.
Yeah.